My name's Marston. I'm sort of a lean startup guy, and about 4 o'clock this morning I thought it might be an idea to talk about this particular thing after hearing the keynote yesterday about power. So I submitted a talk and it was sort of accepted, so that was great. What I do is I basically have a philosophy that it's that we as a group of people, software people, software is eating the world, right? So, we have huge potential as software people. Unfortunately, a lot of that potential is actually wasted because it just ends up as a side project on your disk. So that's one of my things, is the fact that I'd like to try and get people like us to consider more about building the right thing rather than be obsessed about building things right at the beginning, anyway. To actually get some traction, get in the conversation, and not just leave it on your hard disk, always having an excuse why it's not going to be made public. Also, from a lean startup background, I'm a product mentor for various startup weekends and things like Google Launchpad. So those are the sorts of backgrounds I have. I actually have had a software company for 30 years. I've had about 6 or 7 startups in the past 15 years, some of which have been venture backed. So this talk, I've adapted from a talk which is about building products, and I've actually refocused it about building projects, obviously thinking more about open source, modules, PyModules and things like that. So please come and tell me afterwards if it works for you or if it doesn't work for you. But it just seemed like a good idea at 4 o'clock this morning. So. Okay, so here we go. So this is a typical scenario we have when we build a product, service, or project. So we have this idea and we build it. And then we try and market it, put it online, deploy it to GitHub, whatever it is. And then we wait for users, contributors, and things like that. And then often we're still waiting for users, contributors, etc. And then if it's a product especially, startups or even big businesses, I do startup-like activities within corporations as well. They do crazy things to try and get attention. Hat tip here to Amy Hoy on this. But often what happens is people give up because they're not getting, the project's going nowhere. So the problem is that often when we have an idea, it's our guess, it's our guess as to what we're trying to produce or what people might be interested in. And it's all based on sort of assumptions that you make in your head. And our pain is the fact that we invest all this time and effort into things, and sometimes it's costly to family relationships. You're upstairs or out at work or whatever it is doing this stuff, and it can be quite seriously affecting relationships. I know I've been divorced once. We pour this heart and passion into our project, but it isn't actually doing anything. And then when you fail, that's the final kick in the face. So the dream is that we have happy customers who are just delighted to buy, recommend, and or contribute because they love this service, product, project, whatever it is. And my conjecture is it's not really worth doing all this effort specifically to try and create something that's public rather than something that's private if you're not going to get users and contributors. And one of the things that in the startup world, we have this idea that the fact that everybody's in the business of creating happy customers. And I think that projects like open source projects, etc., are really in the business of creating happy users. So this happy user factory, we're trying to generate happy users. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, identify who that might be. And also do things like find out where they hang out, listen to what they're saying. So if you have in your mind of who might be using your thing, try and find a place where they might be hanging out in bulletin boards or, in the university or whatever it is that you're actually, these people might hang out. And listen for these things. So you really want to hear what they're saying, what they're doing. What is it they're trying to make? What are they trying to do with your project potentially? And what do they use already? So how are they solving their problems already? And So you're really thinking about your project is what job are they trying to get done with your project or your service or your product or whatever it is. So this could be equally a software as a service or some sort of module that's on Pi or whatever. So really you're really thinking about when they're doing that, what pains are they having while they do that? What is we saw some great, I was in some talks yesterday where the guy said this is too much code here, and I simplified it and created another project that wrapped this project to something zero project. And yeah, that was a great idea of actually solving some of that particular pain. And what gains are they trying to get? So what are they hoping to get out of this project? And really, your project should either be a painkiller or a gain accelerator, is my hypothesis. And what we're trying to do is turn our users into badasses. This is one thing that again is used in the startup world. You're actually trying to create, your SaaS is, or whatever it is trying to create a badass out of your user, because if they're doing that, they're going to be buying it, more and more of it, or using it more frequently, or recommending it to people, because they can't stop talking about how happy they are about what they're doing, and this is the thing that sort of helped me get it going. So in the lean startup world, we say, don't try and sell what you can make, but make what you can sell. So this is a major tenet of all lean startups. And I would suggest that you might have something else here that we can do for projects that are open source and not really trying to sell something, you're trying to get attention for it. Attention is users, people talking about it, whatever it is, that's attention. These are signals that you've got something worth talking about. So don't try and build attention for what you can actually make, but try and make what you can build attention for is just one possibility. So it's just a suggestion. Really, when you actually find your user base and you have some hypothesis about their problem, this is the thing that you try and distill down as to what is their problem. This whole thing about pain solving or gain creation, what problem is it you're attacking? And you come up with your solution hypothesis, what it is you're going to do to overcome that, what it is you're going to, how your stuff makes it better for them. Often in the startup world, I'm thinking, can I fake it first of all before I build it? Because I actually want to try and see if there's any effect. I want to see what people's reaction is to it, what attention there is coming from this thing. And I'm wondering if that's something you might be able to do, at least with a few users. And we do this often at human scale. How you do that is you write some particular scripts or Python or whatever it is for solving a few users' particular problems. And they actually tell you what it is they need to do, and you work out how to solve it. And this is what I've done recently for a big Fortune 500 company that was actually trying to create a big data product. And so what we did was we actually engaged customers. So when I talk about a customer, I'm talking about, for instance, the company is a real-time process control company. So they actually do go and work out, have thousands or hundreds of thousands of inputs coming into the system every second, and they're trying to determine what mode failures there are within the system, perhaps. And one thing that one of our customers had was they needed to work out, in the petrochemical industry, was actually reducing flaring, because flaring is an environmental problem, they can get fined for it. And so we actually went in with our tools, just, Python, pandas, all those sorts of things, like we collect some historic data, and we just tried to hack on their problem for a week, just to see if we could actually try and work out how we might solve their problem. And then we went away for 3 weeks and actually improved our tool set, and then went and found another customer to work with. So we basically, this is how we sort of like, by actually throwing a few bodies at it, we tried to solve their problem just by writing a few scripts, but then try and work out what the actual product might be at the end of the day, what project we might create around this particular problem. How could we help ourselves, let alone help others, solve this problem? So what I'm trying to do here is demonstrate the benefit before actually building the thing. Because when you build things, it's, you know, it's a big exercise. So when I do build, if I do have to build it, what is the smallest thing? What is the core of the solution? What is the thing I can do that actually will demonstrate this benefit? You know, what is the core thing that I'm trying to do? Because often when you build, as you know, when you build any project, there's like 20% or even 5% sometimes is the actual core of the product. And then you have to build this 95% or whatever it is, remaining percentage around the thing to actually make it work for everybody. So you can eliminate a lot of things that you do if it was a commercial product or a commercial solution by, you know, shortcutting those things. So for instance, I have one of my side products is a board papers system. The focus of that was how it was delivered to the people who are members of boards who are getting board agendas plus attached documents, and previously this was delivered via DHL. So we created an iPad-based solution for that. But the actual thing I really need to concentrate on at the beginning wasn't anything about the means of production, how to produce these papers, upload them, do all that stuff. I could do that as a service. So my users could actually mail me with something, and I could then put it in the system and actually just deliver the end result. So deliver the thing to the doctors. They didn't care how it was produced. Basically, I became like a concierge for doing that. And that's how I learnt what sorts of things anybody who built this system would need to do. So I actually delivered the value, delivered the core value, but didn't actually do the means of production around it. So to do that, you really need to look at what scenarios there are in a system. So, you know, what things do people need to do? What is it they're trying to get out of this system? And then come up with some hard use cases and just I just scribble like diagrams of how that might hang together, or, you know, what sort of things that would work. And then from that, you know, I do this thing where I work out what the central value is, what the central thing is, and try and deliver that value. So what's the thing that's really delivering the value? Often to end users, not actually my customer, but their customers maybe, or their users. So, you know, in the project thing, it's not about necessarily delivering something for the person who is using your project, but actually for what they're trying to deliver. And I go through this idea of how can I prototype delivering that. I really spoke to that. And at this stage, it's not about UX, scaling, security, design, or even being Pythonic, or particularly cool. It's about being useful. And if you can be useful, then this is where you get people wanting to use your stuff. So often when I do this is a skill that I, you know, use quite a lot. So I'm really trying to work on my stack. I also do product katas. So basically I will actually think about something, and even if I'm not necessarily working on a particular project, I'll actually practice many times of how I might take this. How would I implement that quickly? Or what was the core thing about that? So I actually, you know, practice the skill of trying to determine what the core thing is, and actually practice about how I could very quickly deliver the value that that thing delivers. And I try and prune this stack. So I don't try and have a massive stack. I try and prune it down. And I'm really optimizing for expressiveness and productivity. So Python is the perfect thing for that for me. Previously, I did a lot of .NET work and C++ and all that sort of stuff. And I did a lot of scripting stuff back in the days of, you know, when Awk was the scripting language you had, and then migrated over to Perl. I did some crazy things in those systems back in the day, and then come full circle more recently in the last 5, 6, 7 years to using a lot of Python. And obviously, yeah, so really it's about producing your productivity. So one of the things you can do when you're not necessarily working on a project is to actually improve your tool set. So if you Stephen Covey has this in his 7 habits. It's often not just about productivity. It's, and a lot of big companies don't realize this, it's about production capability. So it's the ability to produce is a very important thing. So you tuning your tools and your tool sets and building templates and things like that that rapidly build your thing when you're in front of somebody, you're listening to them and trying to create something that may, give them some experience of what it is they're trying to do, then these tools are quite good. And as I said before, do not try and do everything. Just deliver the one thing that's delivering value, and then you can start building out when you start getting traction. This is a key thing we say in the lean startup world, is basically get your early users paying for something. But it may not be paying with money. It may be paying with reputation. It may be paying by contributing. So let these early users get some skin in the game, because then they're going to tell you the truth. If you actually talk to people, would you do this? It's a very bad way of doing customer development or user development. You actually should be talking about things of how they're doing this now, what problems they've had, etc. So you talk about concrete things in the past rather than abstract things in the future. Because often people don't want to crush your dreams. If you say, I've got this project and whatever it is, I've spent my life doing this, I've got rid of my job, whatever it is, and then they're not going to tell you it's crap. Because they're not that heartless. Well, most people aren't anyway. I am afraid I am, because I understand the problems it creates if people actually go along with false hope. So I do actually, I am quite painful. My wife, who actually runs an accelerator, startup accelerator, she's called the Anne Robinson of startups, because she's pretty brutal. But it's about getting people to think about what it is they need to do next, and actually not just going on with some hope that something might work. There's this thing where people bring this dollar bill, it says, "In God we trust." Everybody else bring data. There's that old thing about big data. This same thing is when you're working on projects. Really, you really need to see what the traction is. Obviously, use available resources. This is there's a management science called effectivity. So, what product do I build? Well, I build something that's easy for me to build. Is it something that I may have an access to a user base for? Do I have an easy access to that user base? Am I part of a group of people and I'm building for myself or I'm building for my peers? That's, this is a key point, a good place to start. When you actually have, if you try and start a project that's totally new, 100% new technology, 100% new market, whatever it is, it's bound to fail, or very, very, very high probability. If you're actually just changing, 30, 40% of your technology or your user base or whatever it is, then you have a much higher chance of success, because you actually have some stable rocks on which to build. I always steal ideas, not from my competitors, but from other domains, other industries. And I think this is a key thing that we do as, computational thinking gets you thinking about, looking for patterns. You'll see patterns in other industries, and if you can then apply those into your particular domain, then that is a really big thing. I do this for a living, and a number of patents have been created just because I've taken one thing from, I don't write the patents, it's just my customers do. I don't like patents myself, but I have to be part of that process for defending their systems. But a number of patents have come from actually this transposing one technology into another. And a key thing is the fact that this, going back to the beginning, this whole idea of having a good idea and working on it, it's really a series of experiments. If you can do these very quickly, turn these things around very quickly and try and see if you could get traction on something, you're far better to find this sweet spot of something that will actually work by doing a number of experiments rather than just iterating on one idea and trying to force it to be something. It could be quite similar. You could use components of what you already have into the new product, but think about running experiments. So if you actually already have a project, you might think about doing this process of actually determining if you can actually find customers or users or whatever it is, and then build your current project into that project, rather than starting with the project and trying to morph it away, over, somewhere else. So that's one thing we do. This is General Patton said this. A good plan violently executed now is far better than a perfect plan executed next week. So don't stall. Don't give up excuses. We have this list of excuses in the startup world why nobody's deployed their products, their SaaS. Why aren't you getting customer traction already? And it goes through, it's not scalable, it's not, the UX isn't right, I'm going to give away to my competitors, information to my competitors. All these things really boil down to one thing. I'm scared that it might not work. So, it's about procrastination. So get on and do it. And part of this is actually making decisions. So again, one of the things that people talk about a lot is about reversible decisions. Some decisions aren't easily reversible, some aren't. If the decision is easily reversible, just do it. Just make that decision. Take your best guess now. You might be able to change it by Wednesday. You might change your mind and say, no, I've explored that route, and that wasn't obviously the best way. I'm going to try this other way of doing it. But if you sit there until Wednesday just thinking about, shall I do this, shouldn't I do that? You don't know which one. You might have hit on the right one, you might have hit on the wrong one, but at least you'll actually have some more data. As a one person or a few people together, or as a small startup, whatever, this thing, tempo, is your killer feature. You can actually change things very quickly. A big company has this whole thing about getting permission. So to implement on a big idea, you've got to go up the management tree and get down. And I always say that trying to get a new idea into a big company is like tossing heads 50 times on the trot. You've got all these potential places where it could be no. So it often is on the way up the tree and on the way down too. So this is key. So get your project or whatever it is deployed out there quickly. No excuses, because you want to start the conversation, because it's the conversation that's going to lead you into the right place to be. So if you're sitting at home working on your project, you're not creating any conversation. Whereas if you actually have something out there that's doing something, even if it's not doing it very well or it's not doing well, you actually have got a conversation going. You've got people giving you, and that's about, you may have a 200 IQ. I don't. But if you've got 10 people with 120 IQs, you've got far more IQs in the conversation than if you're just talking to yourself in your head. So that's it. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Nope. Yep. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, you said about skin in the game?
Skin in the game, yes.
Yeah. What's that mean?
So it's basically having skin in the game is actually having some... So for instance, in the startup, often it's about getting somebody to pay for your product. You're solving their problem. But in a project, like an open source project, it might be the fact that they become a contributor, or they're talking about it, they're tweeting about it, or whatever it is. So they're giving their social reputation about it. But all they actually just using it is skin in the game. If they're actually using it on their project and they're actually pushing you, saying, it's like, I've got this problem, they're actually got the problem. What we often do so when I'm evaluating people with pain, I actually say to them, so what have you done? What are you doing about this already? And if they say nothing, then I think, well, it's not a sharp pain. If they say, oh, I've tried this and I've tried that and I've tried the other, then I know that there's something, something that if I have a solution to that, then it's actually become something I'm going to use and try. And for instance, this thing about the board papers thing, I actually had a doctor who came to me and said that he was using a Dropbox and Goodreader to do this sort of thing as a solution to eliminate DHL. And I thought, well, I've got a better solution for you than that. So, but I've been to people with a solution in my back pocket, because I often don't talk about the solution early on. I often talk about the pain and the problem first of all. I explore that whole area. And then I actually ask them, how are you solving this already? And they tell me, I think, shit, that's a better solution than I've got. If I just productize that, I'd actually have a winner. So it's often useful talking to people about how they're trying to solve things already.
You talked a lot about problem discovery.
Yep. Oh.
Sometimes there are problems people know they have, but often there are problems that people don't know they have or haven't identified.
Right.
And how do you find those and connect with the people who are having those kind of problems?
I don't. They're not got sharp pain. They might. If they're not exhibiting pain, then it's not a problem that I would try and address, because they've got 10 other things that they should be working on before, other than that thing. So basically, I only really identify, with my usage, I only really identify people who have some pain and trying to solve it themselves, or solve it in some way. I think what you're talking about is, like, Steve Jobs says he would never talk to customers, because basically he knows better than they do. I think what you're saying is you know better than they do, because you know their pain before they discovered it. What you can do is use a Socratic method to actually ask them, and actually then you might surface their pain. You might say, does this happen? Especially if you've actually talked to some customers already, and you've actually found things. As part of that conversation, they'll tell you what the effect is of their pain. And if you say to somebody, are you seeing this? And they go, yeah, I do see that. So does this happen as well? And they go, yes. I said, well, do you think you've got a problem there? They say, well, is it something you need to solve now? And they may not necessarily understand it. They may see other effects of it. And so by using a questioning method, you might be able to raise their awareness of your particular problem that you're solving. But if they're not aware of it and that doesn't work, then I wouldn't even touch the problem myself.
But I mean, some things aren't identified as pain because people don't know there's an alternative, right? A horse-drawn carriage isn't a problem or a pain point until there's an automobile.
No. There is a problem, isn't there? Because basically it's killing people's bodies, being transported across, large distances, or it's taking a large amount of time, or the mail isn't arriving. So people do understand there's a problem there. They actually identify something that is, I wish that this was faster. And so that's where something that, like, a major change of state, paradigm shift works, because there is enough. That is pain. There are enough items there that actually identify a pain. If you can then work on that, but if your car is slower than the horse-drawn carriage, then for me that isn't anything I can. I'm not trying to do fundamental research. I'm just trying to help people be useful. And I think in my business we actually try and create. It's like, Thomas, the really useful software company. So we try and produce really little bits of useful software rather than actually things that we're not trying to create the next wearable device or the next, radar-driven UI that Google are producing. I don't have, a number of PhDs working on this sort of thing. I have, a few people working with me. So I can't address that. But it does happen in enterprises where we do actually go and talk to customers.
Thanks so much. Great stuff. So a couple of things. On the skin in the game,
Yep.
we find that if we can get the customer to test the product, that's a
Yep.
huge advantage.
Yep.
And there's a trade-off in that they'll go for a couple of weeks of pain as long as we give them something afterwards. But as long as we swap back and forward like that, they're usually very friendly.
So can I just address that? So basically, when you say test a product, that assumes that you've actually built it. I actually often go and fake a product, first of all. I've actually faked a product in like half an hour. We have various techniques for doing that, call it pre-prototyping. So fake doors, Pinocchio products, wizard behind the curtain, all those sorts of things you can do to actually fake a product, to actually see an effect.
Get some workflow maybe.
And actually just get something happening, so they actually see an effect, and actually from that, how excited they get. If you see I might use that, and you're like, nowhere. If they're like, I need it now, shut up, give me the money, let me pay you money to do that now. Then you
Right,
actually
they want to
go
use the
on
prototype.
Exactly.
Yeah. Minimum you can build, there's an expression MVP, right?
Yeah.
Minimum viable product.
Yeah. So that's the minimum you can, but there again, we actually talk about, again at Google, I work with them, and they actually have this tension between minimal and viable. And often we actually, I would tend to go on the minimal side at the early stages. It doesn't necessarily have to be viable, it just has to do something. And viable often means it can work as a standalone product in some way. And obviously there's a huge range of what people say is minimum viable, but you just actually think there's a trade-off there between minimum and viable.
It has to be just good enough. And then there's one last thing, which I can't remember the link, but a guy building drones, I think, or small aircraft, and they were explaining that it's okay if it crashes as long as you can fix it quickly.
Yes.
And they made the best progress by having really fast repairs from the parts that they rescued.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, if you can actually, give them, if it's failed, like somebody was saying about the financial trading yesterday, there's they have bugs, exceptions to the software, and they actually then have manual process in place to actually fix that up. So basically there's an exception came out of the code and they said, oh, that trade hasn't gone through properly or whatever it is. They actually have manual people who can actually go and fix that up. So if you can fix up the end result, and often if you're the user at the beginning, i.e. you're the user in the means of production, then obviously you actually see the result, you're just aiming for the result, and obviously you can deliver the result without necessarily having all the pain.
Hi, yeah. You mentioned following development katas.
Oh yes.
And then also cookie cutters.
Yeah.
Don't you think the two are sort of contrary to each other, or cookie cutter would eliminate you following a kata, development kata?
Well, I think that there's different katas. There's obviously low-level katas where you're actually doing something that's actually trying to implement something at a low level, and there's actually your kata of actually saying, how can I develop this product quickly? So there's more of a product kata rather than a code kata. So actually, you might sort of, create something that does, has an effect and actually has looks like it's doing something without necessarily building all the code beneath that. So, and obviously, as you say, a lot of code katas are about doing the same sort of thing that a cookie cutter might actually do in the first place. So I just try and I'm optimizing for speed. So, I try to get my process very quickly so that when I actually have a customer in front of me, or I'm trying to deliver this thing, like you're saying, we'll only wait 2 weeks for that, then I need to then, use that sort of thing to actually deliver something. Okay. Thank you.